kicking over. Shoot. This is. Uh, Hello, this is Dr. Paul Dye. Welcome to my podcast channel, Bridges Live, and we're about ready to go live here on YouTube. We are Mental Health Mondays. This should be coming on here pretty quick. And there you are. Hello, Dr. Only. How you doing? Welcome back to Mental Health Mondays.
Yes, glad to be here.
It has been 2 weeks. I was away on vacation, and you were away vacationing.
Yes. Yes. Always taking some mental rest.
You're taking mental rest. You had a mental rest Monday.
Absolutely.
We had gotten a letter. You had gotten a letter. Let's talk about the letter. And with Mental Health Mondays, I want to let people know a couple of things. You can always write into us if you have any questions. You can write into me as Dr. Holistic Science. You can catch us on LinkedIn, all the social medias. You can actually just like pop in, try to reach out, and if you put it on the YouTube channel that you see it on, and you have some of these questions. Some people love the show. I like those comments, and I've sent some the comments to you, Dr. Only, about people just love the conversation we have about Mental Health Mondays. And even though we have panels out there that we talk about a multitude of things, I think we just breaking it down every Monday about some of the small things we can do, right? And recently you got a letter. Let's talk about the letter.
Yeah, so I received a letter from a friend of mine who's a nurse, and she talked about kind of the mental health impact or the mental health experience that she's been having as a nurse, as she tries to get like self-care things done. So as she's trying to go and get her nails done, and as she's trying to go and just take care of herself as a healthcare worker, the discrimination that she's experiencing. Once individuals find out the line of work that she's in, there's kind of this shunning, oh, I can't work with you, I can't see you. And it just kind of has a rippling effect on her mental health and then on her experience with other people. So just trying to understand a better way to kind of understand it and then manage it.
I have also heard this with Black police officers, about how dare you work in that type of fascist regime type thing. It's like I'm curious. I mean, I wish we could have someone who has that thought process against a healthcare worker or against someone about what they do and who they are. It kind of goes on about where does that come from? You know what? I understand people dislike each other, but in mental health, right? We want people to be mentally healthy, spiritually healthy, physically healthy. Having an opinion is healthy. Using it as a weapon isn't. And that's where people kind of get, I don't understand the difference. What do you like? What do you think about? Like, how do we reel this into a conversation that makes sense to people to be like, you can have your opinion, but there's a way to speak it. There's a way to express yourself. And I think if people are unhealthy, emotionally unhealthy, it comes out in words along with the physical, but it probably first comes out in words.
So I think it's an interesting dynamic when you think about police officers as well as healthcare workers, particularly the frontline workers that are in the hospitals right now, because they're often publicly praised for being heroes. Right. And people are, at 7:00, everyone's clapping and banging pots and pans to say thank you for all that you do for us. But then when it comes time for you to really support them, then you see kind of the true colors come out. And I believe that it's based off of lack of educating yourself, and then also based off of fear. So it makes sense there's a pandemic going on. So you're scared that you might, contract the virus or spread it to your children. These are all very normal, understandable fears. But the problem comes in when you don't do the homework to find out all the protection that our healthcare workers are that they have, and to find out like the what happens when you build up antibodies, and the idea that a lot of healthcare workers are actually donating their plasma so that
Yeah.
a vaccine can be developed, and just understanding that just because a healthcare worker may be have a higher risk of being exposed to certain things, it does not mean that they have any higher risk of having the virus as anyone else that you're seeing. So you're taking just an equal risk with every other client that you're seeing, and it's not fair to discriminate just because they're a healthcare worker. That's really the people that, if you say you support and you really see as heroes, that you do take that risk for.
You so here's probably because I was thinking of myself when I was when I was in the military, and when people say thank you for your service and all this other stuff, and I
Hmm.
say, well, I volunteered. It's a choice I made.
Hmm.
I don't believe people really are thankful for things that they don't do.
Hmm.
And here's what I mean, because if you think about the healthcare worker, you might be pretty upset that you're not in that line of work.
Hmm.
Like, or like they couldn't do it,
Hmm.
or they didn't choose to do it. And everyone has a choice about what they do, because service work, your line of work, it's a passion. It's not like, I think I want to work with people and help mental health. I think I just, I was thinking of apple picking. I was thinking of, no, I'll do mental. It's not something you just pull out of the sky. It's
Hmm.
something that you just like, it's a calling. People say ministry and faith-based work is a calling. Service work for people to serve others is a calling.
Absolutely.
Everyone doesn't have a calling to serve others,
Hmm.
and that's fine. But why be so harmful?
Hmm. Hmm. And again, I think it goes back to that lack of understanding and that fear, and kind of responding to the fear-based society that we live in. If you watch the news all the time
Yeah.
and you're at a heightened state, then it makes sense that that's the place that you're working from, and that's the place that you're acting from and speaking from. You might not realize how hurtful or harmful what you're saying is, because you believe you're protecting yourself from this, crazy pandemic that's happening. And again, there's nothing wrong with having those beliefs. The problem comes in when we don't take the time to educate ourselves, because it's through that education that we can really combat the ignorance that a lot of people are acting from. And that fear is really just ignorance.
Yeah, because we're not talking about you having a difference of opinion.
No, not at all.
No, no, we're not saying that you have a dislike, whatever your reasons are. You have a dislike, and you just refuse to care for. It doesn't matter, but
Mhm.
it's how you are saying it. That's the unhealthy part.
Absolutely. And
So
it also comes down to a lack of communication skills, where when you find yourself in a challenging position, a lot of people don't know how to say, okay, wait, let me just do some research and I'll get back to you. There's kind of a push or a pressure to say something, to do something, to end this now, or to have a response now, no matter how polished or unpolished it may be. But taking some time and saying, you know what, let me just do my research and I'll get back to you, can really be helpful too.
I with we're coming up on an election, 85, 86 days, and
Mhm.
it just seems like we were thinking about having an election in November, and it's here, right?
Mhm.
Suppressing the vote, comments about that, who to vote for, thoughts about that, what type of person to vote for, thoughts about that. The Supreme Court justices, and your local election, and your sheriffs, and all throughout the country, and all throughout the world, all throughout legislative, all throughout Congress, people have developed an expression on who, what, and where, and they are feeling stifled about self-validation of who they are, so they don't speak or express their opinion, and yet they get hammered by outside influences of what they believe you should be, and that
Mm-hmm.
creates a sickness.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I think when it comes to any kind of opinion or identity, or having that confidence in your identity and in your opinion to speak on it, it does have a lot to do with first understanding why you believe what you believe, but then also engaging people, maybe people that you feel as more safe, or that you're more familiar with, but engaging people in those conversations more often. So as conversations and questions are asked, you do have a response that you can go to, or again, you can take that, let me do more research approach, but making sure that you really are educating yourself about these politicians, about the local elections, and making an informed decision is one way to really strengthen that identity. And then recognizing that everyone's not going to be okay with it and everyone's not going to agree. And that's part of the process as well.
So what if like I'm gonna use me? What if I get anxiety about talking about something I would like to say? And it doesn't have to be on a political front. It could be over something. It's an anxiety. Like it just bottles up, and then I get tongue tied, and I just have a hard time speaking my mind. Of course, that's not me. But so how do we help with the anxiety issue? Because then I'll be, some people with anxiety, like then I just won't say anything at all.
Definitely. Now, the interesting thing about anxiety is there's a physiological response that's happening. And then there's also that mental kind of train or mental thought process that's happening. So it's important to understand that there are two separate processes that are happening, and to have techniques that address both. So when we talk about the physiological one, I often tell individuals that we don't realize a lot of times when anxiety happens that we're not breathing. And so something
Yeah.
simple like checking in with yourself and say breathe, and taking a deep breath in and a deep breath out in the middle of the conversation. No one's going to be, checking your stomach to see if it's moving slowly or whatever, but something like breathing. A lot of people also have some type of self-soothing technique. Some people tap their fingers on their like legs, or whatever works for you, but making sure you're breathing and then having some type of self-soothing technique whenever that anxiety happens is a good way to address the physical component. That cognitive component, or that thought process, a really good way to address that one is, as the person is talking, to think about what your response is. This does not mean don't listen to what they're saying,
Right,
but
right,
there is
right.
a mental rehearsal that can occur as the person is talking. Okay, I hear them saying this. All right, are you breathing on your chi? Yes, I'm breathing. Okay, what is it that I want to make sure I communicate? And it could be, even you can ask them to tell you more, so that gives you more time to think. And I also have a technique where I'm just like, where again, that sends a pause, or it slows down the conversation enough so I have those extra 3 seconds to think about what I want to say in response.
One of the techniques I teach people is that there's a pressure point right here, right? And you can
Absolutely.
soothe that just by rubbing it. You can, and it helps relieve tension in the brain. So this way it releases some of the constriction that's going on by you um, being creating anxiety, because anxiety comes from different areas in the neurological part of the brain. It can come from the back, and it can come from the frontal lobe, where we have where our thought process and our hemisphere start to close in, and then but if you just hold that just a little bit, or soothe it, or you can even tap it. Also, another what you call pleasure centers right here in the middle of your palm. You can just actually create this little rubbing technique in there. Don't rub it raw. Where we're like, Dr. Paul, I got a hole in I got a hole in my hand. It's not working. And yeah,
Mhm.
there's a difference between soothing and pressure.
Right,
So
right. And another kind of old school technique is a stress ball, where just making some type of tension and then feeling the release and the relaxation of the tension can also be another way to interrupt that physiological components of anxiety.
so if with we have tension flares. So what do you call tension in a conversation? Is it tension felt, or is it tension perceived? Because it can be both, right? Because if I'm pushing on a tension because I'm tense, you don't have to be tensed. So it's actually tension perceived, or is it tension felt by the other person? Which one do you want to address first?
So I think one of the ways we talk about it is as if these are separate things. But I do
Right.
want to talk about how it is a kind of it's a system where one feeds off of each other, where what I'm experiencing and the physiological things I'm displaying, whether it's conscious or unconscious, is being perceived and then reacted upon by the person that I'm engaged with. So it's kind of a system thing where both are playing off of each other. Again, we can break it down to the different components, but I want to make sure we recognize that it's one playing off of the other and they're very interconnected.
Because sometimes you know, like you said, there's this paddle game that's going back and forth within your body, within your mind, within you, that is creating this. And yet it goes back to something we had talked about. Wow, it's that sense of awareness about what's going on in your body and who you are and how you're going to handle it. Because things come up all the times, whether it be at a traffic light, whether it be speeding, does they're all types of neurological things that are happening in your body, and it's how you are going to handle it and
Mhm.
how you are being within it. And I think that's maybe what we're talking about. It doesn't matter if someone's being stressful towards you, how are you going to handle that?
Definitely, definitely. And again, it's not to take away because sometimes I don't know if you've ever had the experience, but sometimes when I can be around someone, I'm like, I just feel nervous when I'm around this person. Like I don't know why, but I just always feel on edge when I'm around this person. And it's a recognition that they're having an experience that is impacting that on some level I'm picking up on. So it's not necessarily perceived in the way or in the definition of the word that it's not real. It's a
Right.
very real
Right.
experience. And so to give word to that, but to understand kind of where it's coming from, to have that awareness, and then you can engage yourself soothing to say, okay, this is not me, this is them. I'm going to let them have their own experience, and I'm going to choose to calm myself down and stay in my truth.
Because I don't believe staying away from it is an answer.
No.
Like, you know, like, oh, here comes this person, and out the other side of the door I go. Or
Right.
here comes this news channel or this person that comes on TV, and I don't want to hear anything they have to say. And in those things, that's where we get separatism, and that's where we end up separating ourselves from the human experience that you are refusing to have with another human being because you feel, and that's the key, you don't belong or get along with them or associate want to associate with them. So is it that's something I think we can work on individually.
Definitely. I think it's important to recognize where you are, though, because you might be at a place where the anxiety experience is so debilitating or so high that at this moment, it may be best to just turn it off and avoid it. Recognizing that you're building up techniques, you're building up your resilience, and you're building up your ability to tolerate that other opinion or that channel or that information. But again, the goal is what we understand about anxiety is avoidance breeds more anxiety. So the
Mm.
goal isn't to continue the avoidance, use it as a tool temporarily, but to build your resilience so you can be able to tolerate it. Because in order to again engage in that human experience and to be able to better understand people that are hold different opinions or are different, we do have to have a certain level of tolerance and resilience.
I this is going to be a tough question, and because it's emotionally charged. Did you see the new videotape that came out about with George Floyd?
I did not.
He was very hyper and excitable because he had been recently shot by a cop in his life.
Hmm.
I feel I have that same feeling myself if I ever get when I get pulled over, you know, my heart's racing and I have to do my own personal techniques, like, oh my goodness. And I'm like, so he was very tense. And I was gonna ask you, in that tense situation, like where I'm going with this is that did could someone actually say that his tense situation caused his own death?
Hmm.
Not talking about what the cops should or should not have done. I'm
Mhm.
talking about the physiological response that George Floyd was having created an atmosphere that increased the atmosphere. Yes, I know a lot of black men are being hunted. Yes, I know a lot of black men and black women are being killed. Yeah, I get all that. So I'm not, I know when people hear like, you talking about, because there's a lot of pushback, like they had no right, they should have, I get it. But in that situation, his anxiety created more.
Mhm. That's
Uh,
that's one perspective. So I think a couple of things play into this. First, understanding the power and the place that a police officer holds and the expectation that a police officer is held versus a civilian. So as a police officer, you have a responsibility to be aware of your emotional responses and how you're experiencing another individual. And
mhm,
so when someone is excitable or when they're tense, it's up to you to in that moment say, okay, I'm going to allow them room to have their experience. However, I'm going to remain in control of my emotions because I'm the individual with the gun in this situation.
right.
And so because of the position that you have chosen to go into, then it is your responsibility. And if you don't feel that you can handle it, then you don't need to be on the field. Stay at the desk until you have that resilience. So when you recognize again the atmosphere that's being created in America, where Black people are hunted, Black men in particular, whenever you engage a Black man, that again should be expected. I'm not saying that every Black man is going to display it, but the fact
Right.
that it is
Right.
displayed is
Yeah.
not going to be the cause for your response. You should have the training and the resilience and the self-awareness in order for you to not only anticipate it, but have the skills that are going to um, have the skills that are going to de-escalate that situation, because that is what your job is. So that's my opinion on again where what the police officer's role and the expectations I hold them versus a civilian.
Right. And that go leads me right into this other what I want to talk about is how can we help our people out there who are on the other side of hostility being directed towards them, like our healthcare workers, like whoever being thrown at in a hostile way. People are being very hostile being towards you, and yet you still have to maintain this. How can
Mhm.
we help them today? With what technique would you give them?
So with something that's an ongoing trauma, it's really hard for me to say something like, oh, breathe through it or self-soothe yourself through it. It's just not sufficient. And so when I think about again an ongoing trauma, first there needs to be a recognition by the individual, but then by the larger community that this is an ongoing trauma. And there needs to be a shift in consciousness as far as how we experience and then how we approach and how we deal with these situations and with individuals that we know are at higher risk for being hunted and things like that. So I think first it comes with a recognition and self-awareness that you are experiencing trauma.
Hmm.
Do your research to understand what that is, what all that means, know that it's not your fault, and then I would always encourage you for something this serious to seek ongoing therapy. It's not something I would encourage you to do on your own or with lay people.
And I'm glad because we would like to put that out there that when you start to feel and create this awareness for yourself and understanding about what is going on with you in certain situations, you definitely got to go to someone and say, hey, I I need some help. And it is to go to a healthcare professional, go to a mental health care professional, and then say, I am experiencing this, and because I really believe this is probably not the first time you've experienced it, and that's what happens with the historical cellular issue with the body. It's just now you're recognizing it. That's about right, right?
Exactly, exactly. And once you start talking to professionals, you recognize the cellular history that you're experiencing. And it's not even just the generation that you're in, but
Right.
generations previous to you. And so, again, it kind of brings down that shame and that blame that you might be going through. And it allows you to really receive the healing that's out here for you.
We will never have less to talk about with the trauma and the healing process. We must practice on a daily. Practice your self-awareness, practice your soothing techniques, practice your breath techniques. Learn these things because in those techniques, it's going to trigger other things, and that's going to unlock these doors that's been suppressed, that's been pushed away, pushed out of mental sight, not in conscious sight. But the body has the key. That's what's so crazy and loving. The body has the key, and the monkey mind is trying to hide the key from you, from your consciousness, because as you take these things into account, these doors will start to unravel, and these doors will start to and you'd be like, I never knew. And once you say I never knew, what do you think they should do next, Dr. Only?
Yes, once you realize that you never knew, for me, that's when I would start journaling. What is it that you're becoming more aware of? Write it down. And so you have a documentation of what you're going to talk to your healthcare professional about.
Thank you, Dr. Only, for coming in. Mental Health Mondays has been so inspiring to a lot of people, and I like to thank all the people that's been writing in and listening. We like to at least touch on some things that's coming up. We know voting is coming up. We know healthcare workers are being not taken care of. They've been experiencing some pushback over this, and not just healthcare workers, but police officers, fire department, service workers, people who are serving your community are getting a lot of push and hatred back, and that's coming from deep within inside the individual. And I know we would like to say we're here for you. Anything else you'd like to say, Dr. Only, before we take off?
Again, just always to seek help. Don't try, you don't have to do this alone. And again, engage the tools and the techniques that you have. Maybe it's a YouTube video that's going to teach you a different breathing technique. But again, try different things, see what works for you. But don't push this under a rug. It's very serious. It's very important. And it is your wholeness and your healing that we're talking about here. So it is a priority.
So let's bow our heads. Thank you, dear Heavenly Father, for bringing us together for Mental Health Mondays. And let you know, we will say this over and over. You are the champion in our cause. We will keep you forward and first and let you know that we, all of us, are not walking alone. Your mental health is very important. It is important to us. That's why we're championing the cause and letting people know that we're giving them tips, giving them advice, but let you know that there are people out there who care and love you dearly. In Jesus Christ we pray, amen.
Amen.
I will see you again next week, next Monday, and you have a great week. Get outside, those people out there, get out, make sure you get at your meditation, get your prayers in, get outside, get exercising, and this also helps with your mental health, get your spiritual health, and get connected with your physical body.
Yes. All right.
Have a great week.
You too.